Hi, I'm Astyo. In this video, I will share 12 tips that I personally find useful on how to make anime-style clothing in Blender, sharing my process on creating my new outfit and also demonstrating some useful techniques with examples. Specifically, I will be going for an anime game style with less model detail and more texture detail. With optimization in mind, it is a style that you could use for animations, VTubers, VR chat, and just game models in general. Some of these tips are also generally useful for any style. So let's jump right into it. Tip number 1 is to have a 2D sketch of your design or even a finished design. I personally painted a draft in Clip Studio Paint before I jump into Blender. It wasn't a final design because I do like to play around with the details and textures in 3D. However, I feel like brainstorming in 2D is easier and more intuitive, and you can visualize the design, test your shapes and colors before committing fully in 3D. So having a 2D design is going to help build a nice foundation to work on. If you're really good at drawing, then feel free to make the 2D design more detailed if it helps. Next, I will open up Blender, load in my 2D references, and start modeling my clothes. Now, one thing to note is that for optimization reasons, most of the time you don't need to model geometry in areas that are not visible. For example, most of my hoodie is covered by the coat, so technically I don't have to model those parts. However, I prefer to model my clothing as a whole, rig them as a whole, and delete geometry afterwards, as that feels more intuitive to me. So I suggest the same for you. Model as a whole, delete the hidden parts afterwards. Depending on which part of the clothes you are modeling, you might want to handle thickness differently. For parts that are visible in most directions, I suggest adding some thickness to it, maybe with a solidify modifier. Some games only model the outside face and the edge that shows the thickness without modeling the inside. This is a great way to optimize your model when the inside faces are not visible. For parts that are supposed to be extremely thin, but you can still see both sides, you can just model one side of it, and after rigging, you can then duplicate the mesh and flip the normal direction of the duplicate to create the inside faces. They will be moving the same way as the outside faces since they carry the same vertex weight. Make sure back face culling is turned on if you are using this method. Now for folded parts like the color of my coat, if I try to add some thickness using the solidify modifier, the geometry can start to look weird in different ways. Maybe you can tweak the settings to make it work, but what I prefer to do is to separate the color from the main clothing, apply solidify modifiers on both parts, adjust the geometry while they're still disconnected or separated, and stitch them back together afterwards. I think this way it is easier to adjust the shapes as I don't have to maneuver through the tight spaces, hide faces, unhide faces while everything is still connected. My brain always begins to malfunction when that happens, like what's going on? It is a personal preference, but do try it out and see if it speeds things up for you. On my coat, I have a few small parts attached, for example the buttons and the lucky knots on the pockets. Since they are relatively small and will be viewed from a distance most of the time, I don't have to model all the tiny details like the holes on the button. For the knot, instead of using a curve and recreating and re-knotting the knot the exact same way, I just modeled the center of the knot with a simple geometry and attached some curves on the sides. After that, I can just paint in the details using textures instead. Always consider the scale of various parts on your clothing. Think about how often will they be seen close up. Are they important or functional or just some decorative parts? Then from there, you can decide how much detail do you want to model in. Moving on to rigging. I like to add extra bones for controlling different parts of my clothes. Some parts I use automatic weights and make adjustments from there, and for some I manually paint in all the weights. In the cases of using automatic weights, you always want to make sure that only the corresponding bones are active, meaning the deform checkbox is enabled only for those bones. For example, I have bones that are made for my hoodie, and I don't want those bones to affect my coat when applying automatic weights. What I can do is to bring in all the bones and select all of them, and in edit mode or post mode, hit Shift W and choose deform. Then go to the bottom left corner and change the type to disable. This way all the bones deform property will be unchecked. After that, you can hide all the bones except for those which will be controlling your piece of clothing. Select all these bones, hit Shift W again, and this time choose enable instead. Now you can apply automatic weights, and the clothing should only be affected by the bones that you chose. You can then quickly re-enable other deforming bones using the Shift W shortcut again. After rigging, I will edit my UVs and start texture painting with the free add-on Ucupaint. So every time when I start texture painting, I always fill in the base color first. So I will add an image layer in the Ucupaint tab and fill in my colors. It is always a nice touch to use gradient instead of a solid color for the base. In the texture paint mode, if you choose the fill tool and go to the tool tab on the side, you can change the fill mode from color to gradient. This way you can just drag across your model and add in some basic gradation. After I have my base color done, I will start painting in the details. One function that I highly recommend using in Ucupaint is the mask function. Let me demonstrate a few ways to use the mask function. So right now I'm in Blender and I will show you guys how to use the mask function in Ucupaint. It's a very handy function and you can pretty much see it from digital painting softwares to texture painting softwares like Clip Studio, Photoshop, and Substance Painter. And you can also use that in Ucupaint as well. So if you have Ucupaint installed, you should be able to see the Ucupaint tab on the right side. If you can't see this, you just have to hit N and you can pull up the tabs over here. So let's go to the Ucupaint tab and I'm going to add a quick Ucupaint node setup onto the plane. So let's hit that. And usually I just choose the color channel for my stylized assets and models. You can also experiment on other channels as well, but for demonstration I'm just going to choose the color channel and I'm gonna hit OK, and now I can start adding in the layers with the setup. So let me just add a solid layer over here. I can hit the plus button and solid color over here, and then I can add a solid color layer. So I'm gonna choose something like blue, okay, and then I'm gonna hit OK. So now my plane is blue. And I can also just preview this in the preview mode. So now I can see the flat color instead of with the shader and stuff. I can just hit this button. And then now I can also add another layer. So let me go ahead and add a solid color layer again. And maybe I will make this like purple. But this time I'm going to check this add mask button. And you can choose the mask type. Usually I just use an image mask. So for the mask color, if I choose black, at first you won't be able to see anything until I start painting white onto the mask, that I will start revealing the purple color. So let me demonstrate first. So let me choose a black mask. That's what I usually use. So I'm going to choose the mask resolution. 1024 is fine. And then if you have UDIMs for your models, make sure you check this button. So now I've added this purple layer with a mask. You can't see it just yet. So let me go ahead and go to texture paint, and let me go ahead and paint in a white color and see what happens. And as I paint in white onto the mask, if I go to solid mode, you can see the texture itself, the black and white texture. But if I go to the rendered view, you can see I'm revealing the purple color. If I go ahead and paint black, then I will be erasing away that purple color. So that's how you can use a mask on a solid color layer, but you can also use it on an image layer. So let me demonstrate and just open up a layer And let me go ahead and open up an image. So now I've loaded in an image of my face onto the plane. And let me go ahead and change the color of the solid color layer over here. So one good thing about the solid color layers is that you can change the color anytime you want. So let me just make it white, okay? So I've demonstrated how to use a mask on a solid layer, but you can pretty much use it on any layer. So let's say I want to do it on my image layer of my face. So what I can do is to go down here and you will find the mask option and you can hit the plus button over here. And what I can do is to add an image mask onto this layer. So let me hit new, and then you'll see pretty much the same settings. This time I'm going to use a white mask. So if I start to paint black on this layer, I will be able to erase parts of my image away. And this is how the mask looks like right now. And this is the layer itself. And let's say you don't want the mask anymore, you can always go down here to the mask and go to the cog button and go ahead and remove the mask, just like that. Okay. And another very handy way to use a mask is to use it on a group layer. So if I go ahead and hit the plus button and add a layer group over here. So now I have a group layer over here, I can move my other layers into the group by hitting these arrow buttons over here. So if I choose this upwards arrow button on my face image, I can go ahead and move it inside the group or just skip it. If I skip it, it will be skipping it without putting it inside the group. But if I go ahead and move inside group, the image is part of the group. So I can also move my solid color into the group, just like that. If I hit move inside group, and now both of those layers are inside my group. So let me go ahead and add another solid layer, perhaps make it purple maybe. And this time I'm going to move it outside of the group. So let me just go ahead and choose the arrow button. And then this time I'm going to put it below the group. So I'm going to skip the group. So now the purple layer is below the group. So now what I can do is to add a mask onto the group itself. So the mask is going to be applied onto all layers that is contained within the group. So if I go ahead and add a mask over here and new image mask, and go ahead and choose a black mask this time. Now if I go ahead and paint in a white color of the group mask, I can reveal both of those layers inside, so the solid white layer and also the image. Yeah, this is how you see me in your dreams tonight. So yeah, this is very handy because you can just focus on part of your model without painting outside of the area. And of course, you can also add masks onto the layers within the group. So let me go ahead and add a mask. So right now I have a mask for the solid color, but also a mask for the group. And this is how it looks like when combined. So the last thing I want to demonstrate with mask is going to be using procedural textures as masks. So right here, I'm going to select my image layer and I'm going to add a mask down here. But this time, instead of using an image mask, I can go ahead and choose all these other options. So I can choose a brick texture, checker texture, also the ambient occlusion and stuff. But right now, let me just maybe use a checker texture and hit OK. And now I have a procedural checker texture as my mask. And if I go ahead and change the colors, you can see it a little bit more clearly. And then I can also go ahead to the UVs down here and just change the scale of the texture. And one thing you can also do is to add multiple masks onto the same layer. So I can also add another mask, maybe with a noise texture, hit OK. So let's say I want to increase the contrast of the noise texture for a little bit. I can go ahead and hit the cog button and go ahead and add a modifier. So let me add a color ramp modifier. And I can just start increasing the contrast of the noise texture just like this. And this mask is fully procedural. You can change the scale and stuff all the time. For better demonstration, I've also applied the same material onto a Cezanne. And what I can do is to start playing around with different types of masks. So let me add a solid color. And this time maybe I can add a mask, which is ambient occlusion. It needs a little bit of baking, but you just need to wait a few seconds. So now I've baked some ambient occlusion onto my Cezanne. I can also go ahead and flip the mask. So invert image. So let me go ahead and do one more example with an orange layer perhaps. And this time I want to use a fake lighting mask because it's also very frequently used in my workflow. I'm gonna hit OK. And right now I have a mask that is based on a fake lighting on my model. The reason why it's called fake lighting is because the light direction is not determined by your lights in your scene, but rather this little control over here where you can control the light direction. And usually I just leave it as the default because it's a very natural top-down lighting. But if I go ahead and invert the mask, so now it makes a little bit more sense. To add in additional detail onto my clothing, I like to add fabric textures. You can find CC0 textures on websites such as Polyhaven or Ambient CG. After downloading the textures, you can add a new layer in Ucupaint using the Open Image option. Choose your fabric texture, and now you have yourself some additional detail. You can play around with the UV coordinates to scale your texture. You can also use your own custom texture like the diamond-shaped texture I used on my coat. It is always nice to add some painted shading. It gives the texture a little bit more volume and a nice stylized look. Normally, I would paint in some ambient occlusion, which is something you can bake directly in Ucupaint, as shown in my example. Also, I like to apply a layer of soft top-down lighting. It's actually very common in games, and you can do this easily as well in Ucupaint by creating a fake lighting layer, also as shown in my previous example. From there, add in extra shading wherever you see fit. For example, I've painted some light colors to help create the volume of my hoodie's pocket. For the buttons on my coat, I also filled in darker colors on the edges. You can also paint in some outlines on your outfit to further sell the anime look. Just by having small details like this can ensure your clothing looks good alone without any real-time shading. A nice texture painting technique for adding detail is using a mix of soft and hard details, or soft and hard edges. Let me demonstrate with a few examples. So let me demonstrate on how to use soft and hard details or soft and hard edges on your textures to create more volume without any additional modeling. So now I have a very basic setup with a solid color and a fabric texture that I got from Polyhaven set to screen and a very low opacity, just like that. And what I can do is to start adding some details on top of this. So let me add a solid color, maybe add a darker blue, and then I'm gonna add a mask as well. And let me go ahead and add a black mask, 1024. And now I'm in texture paint. I can choose a stroke method of line. So the default is base, right? You can just paint freely just like that. But if I change it to line, then I can draw straight lines with just my mouse. So what I want to do is to perhaps just draw a seam in the middle. So let me just drag a line, hold down Alt so I can limit the angle to 45 degrees and just add a line in the middle, just like that. So what I can do to add a little bit more volume is to paint on top of this seam with a softer brush. So if I go ahead and choose a soft brush and decrease the strength or opacity for a little bit and also set it to line, I can just make the brush slightly bigger than the seam, just like that, and just paint on top of it. So let me just hold down Alt, left click, and drag a line again. And this way I can add a little bit more volume to the seam, like it's folding inwards into the seam, and I can decrease the size even more and just draw another stroke again. So one more. Now a little bit more volume. The seam itself is going to be a very hard edge, like you can clearly tell there is a very sharp edge over here, but with a softer edge that I applied on top of that seam, you can start building a lot of volume. And now I can add another solid layer onto this, perhaps a lighter blue color, and with a black mask, hit OK. And I'm going to use the soft brush with the line method again and just paint a little bit outside of the dark area, just like that. I can add even more volume, like there's a little bit of thickness, a little bit of curve, and it's like it's curving into the seam, just like that. So yeah, you can see I can add a lot of volume onto the plane, and not a single vertex has been added on this plane. It's just still 4 vertices. It's very handy. And also, if you go ahead and layer something with a hard silhouette, for example my button over here on top of a soft shadow, you can create this very 3-dimensional effect without having any geometry. So make sure to use these techniques into your texture painting, as it can really help you optimize your model and give your textures a lot of dimension. So yeah, making use of the stroke methods over here, it's going to be very helpful when it comes to texture painting. The default one is the space method, and it's just a free drawing brush, nothing fancy. And I can also change it to line, which I also demonstrated. And you can draw lines, and if you hold down Alt, you can limit the angle to 45 degrees. Another one that I always use is the drag dot method. So if I go ahead and choose that, and if I hold down my left mouse button, you can see I can just move this stroke around until I release it, just like that. But you'll be asking, how is that even useful? Well, let me show you guys. What if I add a texture onto my brush? So hit new texture, and then I can go ahead to the sides over here and open an image. So now I have a texture loaded in onto my brush over here. So let me demonstrate what's gonna happen if I start painting. I can basically just drag around a texture just like that, right? It's like a stamp. I can apply textures all over my fabric just like that. And of course I can move that layer under my highlights and shadows, right? Might look a little bit weird at the moment, but yeah. By the way, this is the logo that I designed recently for the channel. Hope you guys like it. But yeah, one thing to note is that my image texture has a transparent background, so this way I can overlap my textures just like this. If you have a texture with like a black background and white graphics, then you won't be able to overlap your texture just like that. So you need a transparent background in order to make a stamp just like this. So there are also other stroke methods that you can play around with, like curve, and it's a method that I rarely see people talk about on YouTube. It's like there are like a few tutorials about it. I can add a new curve over here, and I can control right click and add a curve point, and I can start with control right click, start drawing a curve just like that. What I can do now after I draw the curve is to make sure I select the appropriate brush size by hitting F and just moving my mouse just like this, maybe this big, and then I can hit enter. Boom, I've drawn a curve onto my texture. Enter again. Now I have another weird curve. So yeah, these are different stroke methods. You can play around with all of them, and yeah, make sure you use them in your texture painting process. As mentioned earlier, you'll probably want to delete faces that are being covered and not visible to the camera, especially if your model will be exported to another software for games or VTubing for optimization reasons. This can also help prevent the clothing inside from poking out during animations. However, if your model will only be used in Blender, then you can use the mask modifier to hide those faces instead of straight up deleting them. In my case, I want to take off my coat from time to time, so I can make use of the mask modifier to hide parts of my hoodie when I have the coat on, and turn off the modifier when I'm just wearing the hoodie itself. To do that, I'll select the faces that will be visible, assign them to a vertex group, and assign the vertex group to the mask modifier. Now those faces that do not belong to the vertex group are hidden. I also added a shape key to shrink my hoodie for a little bit when I have my coat on to prevent it from poking out during animations. With the tips that I shared, I've made a new outfit for my 3D model. I'll probably make a part 2 for making anime clothes, exploring topics like normal maps, height maps, and cloth wrinkles, maybe with a different character. Maybe I'll give this girl that I always show in my shorts some nice clothes to wear, so she doesn't have to be just a floating head. It's kinda creepy now that I think about it. I also have a few videos that I've been planning to make. Some are tutorials and some are fun little animation projects. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel for more 3D anime content. But there you go, these are 12 tips for making anime or stylized clothes in Blender. Like I always say, nothing here is a rule. So just take away and expand on what you find useful to your style. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.